The very first video game I ever played was the original Sonic the Hedgehog. My family got a Sega Genesis when I was about 4 years old, and I grew up playing Sonics 1, 2, 3, Sonic & Knuckles, Sonic 3D Blast, Sonic CD, and even Sonic Spinball, alongside my brother and my dad. Sonic's one-button gameplay was perfect for my 4-year-old self, and for my dad, who still complains to this day that modern consoles just have too many buttons. The concept of the game is simple. Go fast, usually towards the right side of the screen, and try to avoid things that kill you. Despite its simple formula, Sonic grew to be one of the most popular video game mascots of the early 90s. The Blue Blur was an honest-to-God rival of everyone's favorite Italian plumber before his fall from grace. I am a Sonic fan. I'm a fan of the games, I'm a fan of the characters, and I'm a fan of much of the media that's come out around it, whether it's good or bad. Really, thinking about it, there's a good chance my love of cheesy, terrible garbage may have started from watching shows like The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog and reading the early fanfiction.net tier issues of the Archie Sonic comics. But being a Sonic fan means tolerating a lot of crap. I'm not referring to the games as such, that just involves looking for the good in the sea of bad. Instead, I'm referring to the actual horror of being a Sonic fan, which is other Sonic fans. The Sonic fandom has gained a reputation for being one of the most fucked up of all, and while they may not have bullied artists into attempting suicide and then laughed about it, at least not that I'm immediately aware of, there is a much darker and uncomfortable side to it. Somehow, the Sonic brand has become associated with autism. And I don't mean memeing and calling someone autistic in an argument. I mean genuine on-the-spectrum autism.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, and dudes of all teenagers, as well as the gals. I am high-functioning autistic, and in my 25 years, I have seen and learned so much. And today, I intended to share some wise words that I hope each and every one of you will take to heart and allow for yourself and everyone else a better, brighter future.
Why the fandom attracts these sort of people is open to debate, and it's something I actually plan on talking about in a later episode, but what I'm getting at here is how it manifests. The softer side of this is just deviant art tracing and recolors of original characters do not steal. I'm sure most have heard of the fun game where you Google your first name followed by the Hedgehog, and look at all the resulting MS-painted ow the edge cringe that practically defines Poe's Law. The oldest and most well-known lolcow on the internet sprang from the Sonic fandom, and while macing GameStop employees because Sonic's arms aren't blue, goddammit, might not be something common to the fanbase, Sonichu is everything wrong with cringy, poorly written self-insert comic fanfics that I wish I could say were just limited to this. The darker side enters the realm of pure nightmare fuel. I'm not going to show you the wealth of pictures that illustrate this, because I don't want to turn into that kind of channel, but I will tell you that the Sonic fandom is one of the most sexually deviant, disgusting, fetishistic communities on the internet. Wanting to smell Sonic's smelly feet or see a Sonic X Shadow pregnancy story seems almost quaint when you've seen the two of them fused into a hedgehog toilet hybrid, or seen the kinds of sins against God that Tails is apparently into. There are other channels that have gone deep into this topic, and if you're curious and feel like snuffing out the little light inside of you that believes there's still hope for mankind, you can easily search the words Sonic and DeviantArt on YouTube, and then regret that decision on your own time. While I can't speak for Sega of Japan, Western branches of Sega definitely know about their cancerous fanbase surrounding their spiky Azure cult leader.
This is on its own?
Sonichu?
No.
So what did the live-action adaptation decide to do in making posters for their 100% sure-to-be-terrible movie? Why make it a cockshot POV with uncomfortably realistic anthro legs, of course? And make sure you focus on those shoes, they're iconic, and a certain set of the fanbase would be really disappointed if Sonic's feet weren't front and center. The other posters released didn't look any better. There's this more mysterious one that's been the victim of plenty of edits I've already seen, and some, I don't quite know if this is fake, but dear God I hope it is, attempts to brighten the shadows and reveal Sonic's design. And this more real-looking poster in which Sonic doesn't actually look too bad. It also has James Marsden, who is apparently going to play a cop who befriends Sonic and helps him fight Robotnik. Not the first thing I think of when I think of Sonic, but okay. Let's see who's playing Robotnik. Oh boy.
Alrighty then.
Well, it was a foregone conclusion that the Sonic movie was going to be shit. At least it looks like it might be entertaining shit, if only because it's going to be a massive dumpster fire that'll be fun to watch in the coming months. But surprisingly enough, I'm not here to shit all over what's probably going to be a terrible, terrible movie. I've learned long ago that anytime Hollywood gets a hold of something I love, they'll burn it to the ground and sift through the ashes looking for any scraps of change they can find. And because of that, I don't particularly care that they're making a terrible Sonic movie. The only harm they could possibly be doing is if they were preventing another, potentially good live-action Sonic movie from getting made. And that just doesn't seem likely. Instead, I want to focus on the good aspects of what made Sonic a once great media empire. Contrary to what you may have heard from some barely surviving self-parody of a website that squandered every last shred of its credibility and replaced it with political agendas and paid positive reviews, Sonic was actually, at one point, good. More than that, Sonic has been a lot better over the last few decades than you've probably heard. There have been some high and low points with the games, and spin-off media bearing Sonic's name is spotty at best. But why not forget the unsettling sight of Sonic's muscly man legs and enjoy these 6 things you could be doing instead of worrying about the Sonic live-action movie? Before starting the list proper, I would be remiss not to mention the Sonic property responsible for easily the most ubiquitous Sonic meme of all time. But aside from the theme song, I really haven't watched much of all of Sonic X. It always looked terrible to me, so I never really gave it a chance. Ironic, because I'm someone that will defend the campy garbage that is the Sonic Adventure series. I've heard this series actually gets pretty good in Season 3, but that's based on the opinions of others, so I can't really put it on my list. I don't want to discount it outright, because God knows I like things that are much worse than this. But if you want a really good video that talks about the show, go check out this one done by RoboBuddies. She did a good enough job to make me interested in watching it, and she's the reason I started rereading the Sonic comics, thanks to another one of her videos. She recently put her channel on hold, but her old videos are still up and there's some good stuff in there. I'll put both the links in the description. Speaking of the Sonic comics, this is going to have to get another honorable mention for the simple reason that I haven't finished it. For those that didn't know, the Archie Comics Sonic the Hedgehog comic holds the world record for the longest run-in of an American comic book without a relaunch, reaching 290 volumes on the main series. There are also spin-off series and specials bringing that number even higher. I read the early issues of the comic when I was a kid, but by as a kid, I mean between the ages of like 5 and 7. I'm pretty sure my earliest memories of reading the Battle Royale special came from before I could even actually read, and I was just looking at the pictures. I know a pretty decent amount about the comics thanks mostly to how fucking weird it is, and from what I've heard, the later run of the series, after somewhere around issue 160, is actually much better than the weird as fuck early stuff. And the Sonic Universe spinoff actually seems to be pretty well liked. But the Terabad stuff early on is what I do remember, and I honestly sort of like it from a so bad it's good, what the fuck am I reading sort of way. For those unfamiliar with the comics, one of the writers, Ken Penders, is pretty much the progenitor of everything wrong with the Sonic fandom. He wrote a ton of badly drawn, shipping-heavy issues of the comic, complete with Mary Sue, OC, Do Not Steal characters. He also used the Echidnas and the Knuckles spin-off to shoehorn in his own terrible, convoluted story with Echidna tribes, and shit that has nothing to do with the main series. This kind of shit results in a lot of crazy plot lines and pages that are hilarious when taken out of context. Penders was eventually fired, marking an increase in the quality of the comic, and later sued the fuck out of his former employers, causing them to have to reboot the entire canon and erase every character he ever made to avoid having to pay him rights. This technically doesn't break the rules for the relaunch record because it just reset the canon and they didn't release the next issue as a new number 1. I do actually remember my older brother having a lot of the issues of the Knuckles spin-off and thinking that Ken Penders' complicated story was really cool and so much more grown up than stuff for kids my age. Hey, 3 years makes a lot of difference when you're 7. Looking back on these comics now, I can still appreciate them, just in a very different way. I've started into trying to read the full comic recently, and I'm still only about 30 issues in, which puts me behind where I actually was growing up. Despite what I've heard, I can't give a full-on recommendation for you to pick up this series without having read it all myself, so I'll keep it as an honorable mention with the note that you should definitely at least give it a look. There's enough of a fan base for the comic that plenty of other people on YouTube have made videos about it, and that should hopefully give you a good enough starting point to decide if it's worth your time. Back when I was a kid, there were 2 Sonic cartoon series out there. Both of them were available at my local video store, and I had no idea they were 2 different shows. This means that I would have my parents rent me various VHS tapes from these series, and I could never quite figure out in my 6-year-old brain why Robotnik looked different all the time, and only some episodes had that super badass theme song. Two different Sonic cartoons were produced in the US in 1993. The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog is less well remembered, and mostly lives on through memes and YouTube poops.
If someone tries to touch you in a place or in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable, that's no good.
However, Sonic the Hedgehog, typically referred to as Sonic Sat AM because of the time slot it aired in, has a much better reputation. And for good reason. Despite the corny first episode, from episode 2 on, the series has a much more serious tone, as we follow Sonic and the Knothole Freedom Fighters as they fight Dr. Robotnik to win back control of planet Mobius. This same premise was used for the Sonic comic, and the two share a multitude of characters and ideas. Ken Penders actually claims to have taken inspiration from the cartoon, and credits it for motivating him to change the comic into a more serious adventure series, rather than the pun-heavy gag comic it was at the start. Sonic the Hedgehog is overall a pretty good show, although aspects of it have not aged well. Sonic's too cool for school 90s attitude and catchphrases are particularly grating.
Whoa, Mondo spooky! Bad move, Hedgehog! Mondo, bad move! You can't go without a ring. Sal's in Mondo trouble, and I'm going, ring or no ring. Spin to win time! Like to hang with you, botheads, but I got a juice.
But overall, it still holds up. There's still plenty of kid stuff there to be sure, but the stories of episodes often deal with more serious topics. The main cast are freedom fighters, which is a much nicer way of saying terrorists. If their constant strikes on Robotnik's forces were killing people instead of robots, this would be a very different show. The show is often heralded for its more serious tone and good character writing. Robotnik might be a bit of a Dr. Claw ripoff in this show, but he's definitely a menacing villain. From the outset of the series, he's already taken over all of Mobius and has turned almost every one of its animal inhabitants into robots. One of the early episodes even includes Sonic finding his roboticized Uncle Chuck, who he manages to bring back to his senses, only to have to be dragged away from him when he suddenly reverts back to a mindless badnik at the end of the episode. That's a lot more emotional depth than you get from the other show. A lot of the character interactions are also pretty well written. I particularly like the dynamic between Sonic and Princess Sally. The show isn't all good though. While it boasts the voice talents of actors like Rob Paulsen, Christine Cavanaugh, Jim Cummings, our titular hero is voiced by, of all people, Urkel himself, Jaleel White.
Sal, are you asking if I can get through there? Sal, is the sky blue? Is dirt dirty? Do bears...
Sorry, I asked.
I've seen people defend Jaleel White as doing a good job as Sonic's voice, and I have no idea what they're thinking. I guess maybe it's because they grew up with him, but honestly, his whiny fucking voice does not match Sonic at all.
Come on, guys, how about a round of applause?
He's supposed to be cool. He's using all this rad 90s lingo, but when it's coming from a voice famously matched to the definitive nerd character of the 1990s, it just sounds like a geek trying to sound cool, which is honestly what it is.
You put the pedal to the metal and baby, I guarantee you'll be juicing to the 10th degree. Crank super...
That being said, if you can stomach Jaleel White's voice, most of the other character voices are pretty well acted. Another complaint I know some people have about the show is that the final episode is really, really good, and then pulls out a kind of a cliffhanger teaser, which ultimately goes nowhere because it got cancelled. But this wouldn't be the first time a video game tie-in ended on a cliffhanger that never went anywhere.
Luigi, Mario!
You gotta come with me, I need your help.
What's wrong?
Overall, there's a lot of good stuff in the show, but after rewatching it, I don't know if I'd recommend it to a non-Sonic fan. The nostalgia glasses are strong with this one, and I don't think the show has enough appeal for someone not familiar with Sonic, or who isn't revisiting it from their childhood. I like it, but you can take that with a grain of salt. The first thing on this list that I can recommend without caveat is Sonic Mania Adventures. Originally released one at a time as 2-minute episodes, all 5 of which have now been collected into one video, the series is a very simple story told without dialogue by the beautifully expressive characters and incredibly animated action. The way animator Tyson Hess is able to perfectly convey the personalities of each of the characters visually is wonderful. And the bright colors match the overall upbeat feeling of both this series and the Sonic Mania game they were made to promote. Sonic Sat AM gets credit for its darker tone and more serious take on Robotnik as a villain. But for my money, this is the version of Sonic, Robotnik, and the other characters that I'll take. It's also much more in line with the Sonic games. The music is also fantastic, using themes and even sound effects from the games in both subtle and overt ways to match the setting, characters, and actions on screen. The whole thing is only about 11 minutes long. There's also a holiday special that just came out the other day starring Amy, and it's goddamn adorable. Sonic fan or not, you need to watch this, so go do it. Now, pause this video if you have to. I'll be here when you get back. Before the year 2014, Sonic Boom meant a lot of things. To some, it was the phenomenon which occurs when an object travels faster than the speed of sound. To others, it was a move you could spam in Street Fighter to piss off your opponents. And to people like me, it was a kick-ass song from Sonic CD that came complete with an awesome animated opening. But thanks to the abysmal tragedy of a game developed by Big Red Button Studios, Sonic Boom is now synonymous with one of the worst games released this decade. And Sport Tape. And that's a shame, because while Sonic Boom may have been an unflushable bowling ball of shit on a level that would require calling hotel staff and a Roto-Rooter just to get down, the TV show the series spawned is actually pretty darn good. Great even. While one might expect the Sonic Boom cartoon to have to match the plotline of the game, the result is nothing of the sort. The Sonic Boom cartoon is a mostly episodic sitcom following the lives of Sonic and his friends, as they do general sitcom-y cartoon stuff. Maybe in one episode, Eggman's latest robot will go haywire, causing him to have to ask Sonic and his friends for help. And in the next, series' best girl, Styx the Badger, might have to shed her feral dumpster-digging ways to go all My Fair Lady for a fancy dinner. The main characters have been somewhat redesigned and their personalities are a bit tweaked. Some, like Knuckles and Tails, have basically just had their personality quirks turned up to make for better comedy.
What luck! This rock would make a perfect focusing lens for my hyper-exo magnifier. All I need is a refracting chamber and an influx reflector. Right, Knuckles?
Do you use big words just to make me feel, what's that word that means not smart?
Obtuse?
Yeah, see? That's what I'm talking about.
Whereas Amy goes through a bigger change and becomes more of an HR department therapist, let's all team build and share our feelings kind of character.
Let's frame our statements with, when you do this, it makes me feel this. Do you feel scared without a home? Do you feel alone? Are you eating your feelings? I can keep you company. Let's explore your feelings about being a roommate. Now, pretend this balloon is your self-esteem.
Stop! Stop! Stop!
Although that doesn't dominate her personality too much. Robotnik is more of a bumbling oaf character, and he generates a lot of the best comedy in the show.
Any chance we could borrow your lasers so Tails can send this guy back and prevent the destruction of pretty much everything?
Sure. You should have just asked me in the first place. No, but I need him back by Thursday.
What's happening Thursday?
I'm gonna attack your, I'm having a party.
My favorite character is probably Styx, a new addition to the world, who's a conspiracy nut with a 2-pack-a-day voice.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. Do you understand that?
That's pretty well reasoned. Sure you don't want to add anything? Like a time-traveling banana told you to do it? No.
And some kind of New York accent.
I knew it. He did have an obliterator bot. Why doesn't anyone ever believe me? It's not like I'm paranoid. Stop following me! You can doubt me, but I'll protect you anyway, because I'm a good friend, and because it distracts me from the government agents who are replacing my plants with violins. That's right! I'm onto you, buddy!
What is it?
A proposal for government-mandated healthcare.
Run for your lives!
The show has high and low points, but any episode that focuses primarily on Styx is one that I thoroughly enjoy. Sonic Boom lasted for 104 11-minute episodes, spanning 2 seasons. As of now, I think it's on permanent hiatus, which is pretty much code for canceled. And for what it has, a lot of it's good. It's not perfect, and there's definitely a lot of predictable low-effort crap in there. Some episodes have phoned-in writing, the animation can occasionally look extremely cheap, and some jokes border on hardcore cringe. But hey, no show is perfect, except for Breaking Bad. When it's done well, the comedic writing in this series is really good, and when the show is at its best is when it pulls off well-written, self-aware humor.
Shadow the Hedgehog! Hey, everybody, look! Shadow's here! I knew springing for those embossed invitations would impress.
Who's he?
He's only the second most popular character in the whole canon. Let me get you a chair, Mr. Shadow.
The Sonic series has a lot to make fun of.
Hey, we worked all day on that!
Your shoddy craftsmanship brings shame on all hedgehog kind, and for that you shall perish.
And the fan base even more so. Sonic Boom constantly jokes about its fans hating the characters' redesigns or not liking the direction of the show. They make fun of the games. And there's even an entire episode that does an homage to Misery, starring an obsessive taper based on Chris Chan. They even make a reference to Sonic's arms not being blue, with a borderline Mpreg-looking fan art picture. It's a decent enough show on its own, but if you're more steeped in the Sonic fanbase, you owe it to yourself to give this show a chance.
Studios should stop recycling the same tired old properties and make something original for once.
In that same video store where I rented VHS tapes of the 2 Sonic cartoons, I always remember seeing a tape that was simply labeled Sonic the Hedgehog the Movie. And to this day, I still don't know why I never rented it. Maybe it's because Knuckles had a cowboy hat. The Sonic movie is actually not related to the 2 American-produced 90s cartoons. The movie was actually made in Japan and simply just released as 2 OVAs labeled Sonic the Hedgehog. Then later, it was dubbed and sent straight to video in the USA as Sonic the Movie. Robotnik uses a design reflective of the video games, and there's some weird one-off characters that we've never seen before and have never seen since, to the best of my knowledge. And because it was made in Japan, the world that everything is set in is completely different from the Mobius, Knothole, freedom fighters kind of universe that American fans had become accustomed to, mainly thanks to the Saturday morning cartoon and the Archie comics. I only got around to watching the Sonic movie a few years ago, and that's something I actually regret, because as terrible as the dub is,
Look! The relics are sinking right into the ocean.
Sonic! I bet it's because the robot generator is out of control and causing reactions under the ground!
the movie's actually really good. Well, part of it is. The story is pretty basic, but that's okay because it's not very important. Basically, Eggman shows up and takes the president of whatever world this is and his daughter hostage in order to force Sonic to defeat Mecha Robotnik, which has taken over Robotnik City, but this is a trick and it's all a ploy to get Sonic there so he can scan him and make Metal Sonic. I don't know. Honestly, the story's pretty dumb, but who cares? Because the animation's gorgeous. And the action scenes, whether they be in Robotropolis or the Arctic fight at the end with Sonic and Metal Sonic, are so great that they pretty much justify the rest of the OVA on their own. If you've never seen this weird sort of gem from the early years of Sonic, give it a watch. But you may want to fast forward through the talky bits and avoid the horrendous English dub. For a series as spotty as Sonic the Hedgehog, there is one consistently good aspect to every game: the music. From its very beginning, the Sonic series has had some fantastic music. This is due in part to pulling from pop bands to find composers for their games. The first 2 games were composed by Masato Nakamura from the band Dreams Come True. Composers for later games were also pulled from pop bands, and also had a tendency to reuse bits of music. It was even long rumored and later confirmed that Sonic 3 actually contained composition work from Michael Jackson, before he separated from the project for reasons that seem to be disputed. That's right, Sonic was once so big that the King of Pop himself was brought in to help with the music, and even though he never finished the project, his influence can still be heard. The songs from these games are really good on their own, whether it's the songs from the Genesis era, Crush 40's kick-ass themes for the Sonic Adventure games, or even the orchestral songs from the more contemporary games. I've had music from the Sonic franchise on my phone or whatever media player I've had since around 2005. And I will never miss a chance to belt out a Crush 40 song if it comes on in my car.
Rolling around at the speed of sound, got places to go, gotta follow my rainbow. Can't stick around, have to keep moving on. Guess what lies ahead, only one way to find out.
Sonic music is also pretty popular with internet musicians by way of cover and remixes. OC Remix is loaded with great remixes and reimaginings of Sonic music, and can be a pretty fun rabbit hole to jump down. On the cover side, one channel I found a while back that does some great covers of Sonic and other video game music is Songy? Songe? I don't know how you pronounce it, but the links to some of my favorite covers he's done are in the description, and I definitely suggest you check him out. As much as I love the Game Grumps, they and others are a big part of the whole all Sonic games are terrible narrative. Yes, Sonic 06 is a horrendous mess. The game was basically unfinished when it released, making it buggy, ugly, and full of beta-level unfinished content that occasionally broke the entire game. More than that, the story was bad, the setting led to some creepy moments, and just about the only thing potentially salvageable was the music. But in trying to make every new Sonic series live up to the Sonic 06 series he did alongside John Arian, yes that's his real middle name, Jafari, Aaron has played a lot of Sonic games, and he hasn't really always done the best job of representing them accurately. I don't want to accuse Aaron of intentionally failing at a game to make the game look worse than it is. After all, I don't have any way to provide evidence that that is the case. I can, however, say that Aaron descends into dark side Phil levels of being bad at games sometimes. And he'll stick to a badly made point, doing anything to prop up his argument just to keep himself from losing face. If you don't believe me, I have roughly 5 hours of This Is How You Don't Plays for you to watch. The meh, Sonic has always been bad NPCs really don't have a leg to stand on. Spin-offs aside, the core game series was consistently full of great games up until, arguably, Sonic 3D Blast. And beyond that, it didn't really dip into shitty from a gameplay perspective until Sonic Heroes. Some parts of the adventure games were better than others. But overall, the gameplay was fun and the story was just as cheesy as you would expect from the series that brought you the insanity of Ken Penders. This is what young me accepted as deep, epic video game storytelling, and I thought this shit was fucking epic when I was a kid. I mean, come on. A moon base with a laser pointed at the planet, the evil twin of the main character being the ultimate life form, weird asshole superpowers of fucking using mystical artifacts. If this was an anime with human characters, it wouldn't be any different from every other piece of shonen garbage out there. But a bad story does not equal bad gameplay. Sonic's transition into 3D was a tough one, and when done wrong, it can go really wrong. But in my honest opinion, Sonic Adventures 1 and 2, Sonic Unleashed, the daytime levels at least, and Sonic Colors are legitimately fun games, if you're down for the 3D Sonic formula. And even Heroes has some good moments. I may hate the abortion that is Sonic 06 for being a bad game, but I hate it more for what it's done to Sonic's reputation. Sonic Generations was a celebration of where the series came from, and it was an amazing comeback game in its own right. I recommend it wholly without caveat to anyone interested in the Sonic series. And while I can't speak for Sonic Forces, as the literal OC creation mechanic turned me off from the get-go, I've heard it's okay, albeit incredibly short, so I might give it a shot when Steam sales bring it low enough to be worth my money. But where the Sonic has always been bad narrative really falls apart is in the original 2D games. Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic 3, Sonic & Knuckles, Sonic CD, the Sonic Advance series, even Sonic 4 despite its weaker first episode. 2D Sonics are good. The Genesis-era games are why Sonic was a force to be reckoned with, and why he was able to go toe-to-toe with Nintendo's mustachioed mascot. The momentum-based gameplay of the series is what set the original games apart. Everyone knows Sonic's gotta go fast, but do they remember why? The entirety of early Sonic's gameplay and level design came from the need to build up momentum to properly platform. If you hit an obstacle or mistime a jump, you could lose that momentum and be unable to build it back up again, potentially cutting off entire sections of the level to you. This is something that Generations understood, and it used it to great effect, rewarding good platforming with access to easier and shorter routes, usually higher up on the stage. It's intensely satisfying to hit that groove and speed through a level, dodging hazards, bobbing and weaving through danger like it was nothing, and it makes it so much more jarring when you fuck up and lose that groove, and suddenly you have to build it back up again. I'd almost compare it to something like losing your rhythm in Guitar Hero, and having the song suddenly start sounding like crap. If you've never played a Sonic game, I don't know why you've made it this far into the episode, but I absolutely recommend the first three. That is, if you take Sonic 3 and Knuckles as being one game just as God intended. And if you have played the 2D Sonic games, but you haven't had a chance to check out the newest release, Sonic Mania, it's an amazing return to form, thanks to the efforts of former Sonic fan game creator Christian Whitehead, which not only remixes old levels and bosses, but adds some amazing new ones. I wholeheartedly recommend that you play it now, if not sooner. It's a love letter that casuals can appreciate, but true fans of the Sonic series will absolutely love. And there you have it. 6 things you could be doing instead of worrying about the Sonic live-action movie. At least I think that's what the original premise of this video was. There is so much Sonic media out there, and whether good or bad, I hope I've encouraged you to at least take a look at some of it. If you agree with my recommendations, or you have something else you feel like you want to add, don't hesitate to mention them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again in 2019.